Welcome to 5-Watt World, where we're just to help you get the most music from the least gear. This is the first video in a series I'm calling Just One Amp. Videos where I wrestle with the idea of finding just one amp that's big enough to gig with, but can also be dialed back to be excellent for at-home practice as well. First, let me say that you've probably noticed a decided absence of gear reviews on 5-Watt World. I do look at a lot of gear through the year, but I'm only going to make a video about the gear I use. The way this works at FWW is I identify a product and I reach out to the manufacturer, outlining the goals of the channel and my interest in looking at their stuff. They decide whether to share it with me without any strings attached, no expectations that I'll give them a positive review or make a video unless I find the gear works into the mission of most music with the least gear. My hope is that it might save you some time in searching and that would leave you more time for playing. This idea of just one amp feels like it's getting more possible all the time. The analog and digital realm have started to collide, and some new hybrid amps out there are really interesting to me. Sometime last year, the first amp like this to get my attention was the REVV D20. This is around the same time I was trimming back my recording rig. I'd had a 2-notes Torpedo Live in a rack with my audio interface for about 2 years. I'd used the Torpedo Live to record most all the guitar parts for the channel and was impressed by its ability to run an impulse response that simulated the vintage CTS 10-inch speaker in my 5-watt FYD amps Big Verb. It sounded just like what I was hearing in the room, but I wanted to go to a more compact recording rig by losing the rack and going to a desktop interface. So the Torpedo Live went away, along with my bigger interface. I dusted off my Sennheiser 906s and I muddled on. Then along comes this little amplifier, and wouldn't you know it, just like a lot of artists I recently featured in my 5-Watt Favorites video, these innovations are coming out of Winnipeg, Canada. The amps at REVV are designed by Dan Trudeau, and everything from their pedals to the biggest fire-breathing 120-watt amp is built right there in Winnipeg. Their head of sales and marketing, Derek Eastveld, spends a ton of time gathering information from touring musicians, session guys, and recording engineers to get input on what works. This is just like the way Leo Fender did it back in the 50s. Listening to musicians about what they need from their instruments is the best way to produce the right sorts of products, in my opinion, and something that's gotten lost by the bigger companies these days. I'd been following Joey Landreth for a couple of years, and I think I'd seen just about every video in which he'd made an appearance. So of course I'd seen the string of videos he'd made with REVV as well. And that's how I'd heard about REVV. A pretty auspicious beginning. So they started this with the D20 as a perfect little studio tool, having worked with session guys in Nashville to voice the amp and even having them help to create the 6 impulse responses that come preloaded in the amplifier. They followed up this year with a higher gain version, the G20, that also added channel switching and a few other cool new features. I've been playing these little guys since I got the D20 last year, particularly as my main platform for testing pedals, getting to know them and using them for recording. There have been great videos made on these amps by Sean Tubbs and Rabia Masad, already covering all the features in detail. So I figured I'd do a video about what I find engaging about the function and purpose of the amps from a 5-Watt World perspective. And since it's 5-Watt World, let's make it 5 things. Number 1, 4-watt mode. For reasons that I think are likely apparent, I sort of think of this as 5-watt mode, but that's just me. At home or in the studio, this is where the amps live. Increasingly, people are cutting in a live room again together. And 4 watts is pretty much perfect for that. It's like having a full-featured amp running at the volume of a champ. But the most impressive thing to me about their 4-watt mode is that it sounds just like the 20-watt mode. Now, with the wizardry available on our phones these days, we tend to take this sort of magic for granted. But having done a little bit of amp building, including a couple of different methods for reducing wattage, like pentode and triode switching and Kevin O'Connor's famous London power scaling, I can tell you that this is not easily done. And whether we like it or not, the gigging world these days, for almost everyone, is a 20-watt world on stage. I checked in with my buddy Rhett Scholl. And he told me that really 15 watts is probably where his rig is at most of the time. And with these little REVV amps, if you need more volume in the room, you can just run the IR-loaded XLR out on the back of the amp to the front-of-house mixer. And there you go. Number 2, they have reactive loads and impulse responsives as part of the amplifier. These were the first production tube amps to have embedded 2-notes reactive load and impulse responses. This has two main advantages. If you're familiar with tube amps, you know that a speaker has to be attached when they're on, or you'll damage the transformers. By having the reactive load there, you can play or record the amps without a speaker attached. You can then monitor either in your studio monitors or on a pair of headphones, recording silently directly to your DAW. Secondly, the ability to practice silently. It's probably an option I don't use as often as I should. My studio space is in an open stairwell in the house, so being able to play with any level of gain I choose with just headphones is an amazing feature. This should appeal to anyone that doesn't live alone or lives in an apartment or townhouse anywhere. Number 3, light and compact. With the amp weighing in at 9 pounds and shipping with its own carrying case, running it into a Mojotone Lite 1x12 cab running a Celestion Neo Creamback speaker, the whole rig is very compact. I had Mojotone build the cab to sit on end, so the footprint is just 10 inches by 16 inches. Built from solid pine, the cab with the speaker weighs just 16 pounds. Mojotone built the cab in custom white Tolex and FWW signature navy grill cloth to go with the white head. If your rig is going to be this compact, it's probably a good thing that the bass player can see it easily on a dark stage so it doesn't get knocked over during a particularly boisterous tune. The whole rig weighs less than a Princeton, but with the wattage output of a Deluxe. Sitting on end like this, to me it kind of looks like a mini version of Robin Ford's Dumble rig or Joey Landreth's Bloomfield Drive rig. Yeah, well, it makes me laugh anyway, and it makes me smile to think how light it is to carry it in and out of the gig. Number 4, impulse responses that you can load yourself. They come preloaded with 6 IRs in the 2-note section of the amplifier, but you can load your own as well using the provided software. You can have 6 different IRs preloaded in the amp and quickly switch between them for different tones. And with the G20, you can set different impulse responses for each channel, then use MIDI to switch between them. So if you prefer the sound of an open back 2x12 cab with a Celestion Vintage 30 mic'd up with an SM57 and a Royer 121 for example, for your clean sound, you can do that. But then you might want a 4x12 closeback cab with Celestion greenbacks for your lead sound. No problem with this little guy. My longtime friend Rick Beato has argued in the past that having multiple speaker cabinets is more critical to creating different sounds in the studio than having different amps. So by using these impulse responses, you can collect and have an almost endless batch of tones by loading different cab, speaker, and mic combinations. And then, it even lets you run them in different rooms for reverb, all controlled inside a piece of software that makes it easy to use. Number 5, it's a tube amp and feels like one. I've been spending a lot of time with an HX Stomp lately, so the analog versus digital thing is something I've been thinking a lot about. I'm amazed at what I can get out of the Stomp, but the guys at Line 6 would be quick to tell you that they still love their tube amps as well. Different tools for different jobs and all that. Yes, there is a digitally controlled reactive load and there are these fancy speaker algorithms in there that allow silent running, but at its heart, this is a tube amplifier, and it still feels like one. Actually, for a guy like me, who loves simple amps like Fender Champs, the simplicity of the amp itself is a huge benefit. There's just one preamp tube, one phase inverter, and a pair of 6V6 power tubes. You've probably heard that the tube in the first position, V1 for valve 1, has the biggest impact on the tone of the amplifier. The simpler the circuit, the bigger the impact of each component, so changing out the V1 tube can make a big difference. I'd heard Jimmy Herring rave about late 50s Ampex Bugle Boy tubes years ago, and so when I had a chance I grabbed one. That tube has sort of become the channel emblem, as it's the tube flare in the opening credits. I loaded it up in the Rev and loved it. I think it adds a certain kind of 3D effect to the amp that's hard to describe, and I mean that in the best possible way. Okay, that's 5, but let me sneak in an honorable mention. The G20 has this wide voicing switch. It seems to act like the loudness switch on an old stereo amplifier, punching up some bottom end and some upper mids at the same time. It's great as a quick tone change choice when tracking guitar parts, and it's on most of the time for any edge or breakout sounds for me. There's a lot more to these, but these are my favorite features. On top of all this, it's a good value. My 2-North Torpedo Live cost me about $1,000 3 years ago. Any of the boutique amps that I own would set you back at least $1,500 used. So with this little head, I have both of those functions and in a portable 9-pound package. As obsessed with light and powerful rigs as I am, this is an incredibly powerful combination. So though 5-Watt World is really about finding the simplest solutions for playing, recording, and gigging, finding a great value is always a nice bonus. I wish I could tell you that I'm strong enough to whittle the amp collection down to just one, but honestly, I'm just not there yet. That's likely the subject of another video. But it's amps like this little Rev that make it seem more possible all the time. If I missed something, or if you have your own REVV 20 series story to share, please put it in the comments for everyone to enjoy. If you enjoyed this look at the REVV 20 series amps, hit the like button, and if you haven't subscribed yet, go ahead and hit that too. Remember to click the bell icon to be notified when we put out a new video. If you want to support these videos more, stop by the store and grab a t-shirt or mug. The link's at the top of the description. Thanks for watching. Until next time, thanks for being a part of the 5 Watt world.